Okay, hello. So I'm going to start off by talking about how 2017 has been a pretty exciting year for Tarsier Studios. We have released not only our first original game, but also our second in the same week last month. There's a bit of thank you. There's a little bit of disagreement in the dev teams about which one technically counts as first. But I think that's not really that important for the company founders, because for them this has been a sort of 12-year journey to actually get to this point of achieving their goal of releasing original games. And Little Nightmares even has some of the DNA from way back then, for those of you who remember the City of Metronome. There's some similarities in there. It also has some history with Nordic Game, because we were here in 2014 and were awarded some money from the Nordic Game Fund to work on a little concept called Hunger. And that, along with some money from Creative Europe, allowed us to put together a prototype which we took to GDC the next year, which got the attention of a lot of publishers. But of all the people who were interested, it was Namco Bandai who really made a connection with Tarsier. They were so passionate and enthusiastic about the concept, and they seemed to really get what we were trying to do. And really understood like what the vision was. And also they were looking to start doing stuff in Europe with their European office, and they have the experience of growing franchises into, and building worlds that people really enjoy and really engage in. So that's great for us. So their approach was really aligned with what we wanted to do with the game. And they really understood and helped with our ambition to create a very detailed game, and a game that really focuses on little pieces of how the game feels, and allowed us to do that and reach our ambition. And that's quite a lot of what I'm about to talk to today. So Little Nightmares was a smallish project, 20 developers-ish, around that, for an 18-month production. There was a small pre-production before that with a smaller team. How I fit into that, I was working with the player character, the little girl called Six, as the gameplay coder, and the player character team was mostly myself and one animator, Marcus. We also had support from tech art with a lot of things like rigging and tuning of IK and cloth simulation and effects. Loads of support from audio, and obviously support from design in terms of the vision of the character, and also implementing a lot of things in levels for us. But there was also a lot of autonomy in the team. We had a lot of ability to make decisions about how the character should be and what her personality is and how everything should feel with her. So the actual vision for the character is all about the feel. We don't have a huge number of mechanics or a huge number of deep mechanics. We have quite simple mechanics, but all of them, we focused a lot on how they feel to play. And it's really important for us to connect the player to the world. So the game isn't technically a horror game, but we rely a lot on sort of suspense and tension and making the player feel genuinely scared and worried about this character. And to do that, like most horror games nowadays are using the first-person view. And we're in third person, but we also have the cameras kind of situated outside of the rooms, looking into them. So we explicitly place the player outside of the world, which means we have to really do a lot of work to bring the player into that world to make them care about it and be genuinely scared. And in doing that, we don't have any cutscenes, we don't have any dialogue, we don't have an explicit backstory for the character, we don't have motivations, we don't acknowledge her name in-game, you never see her face, and there's no customization options to make her feel like your own. So we have to do a lot of work through just the way that we present her in terms of the mechanics and the way that she animates, and get it across in that way. So in terms of connecting the player to the world, we kind of view it this way. We try and connect the player to Six through our controls and feedback, and a lot of that is to do with having very analog controls. You've always got control of the character, apart from very occasionally when we take control away, which is normally used for impact, so you actually feel the controls have been taken away and it makes an impact on you. And things like when you grab hold of stuff, you have to hold in the grab button. And things are supposed to be big in the world for her. It's supposed to be difficult for her to move things. You're supposed to feel the tension in her. And having you grab hold of that button is an explicit choice to make you have some tension in your hand. It's less effort that she's doing, but it's still something, and it makes you feel like some empathy with her. The other side of that is that we try and connect 6 to the world, and that's a lot of things to do with physicality. It's in scare quotes because there's nothing really physical about it. It's just having the world react to the player, and the world react to the character, and the character react to the world in this very dynamic back and forth that we, very back and forth that gives you a sense that the character is like realistically situated in the world. So I'm going to show a quick video now to demonstrate one idea around this. And what I want to be looking at in this video is the way that she moves when she's swinging on the swing. And we have, as she swings, she kind of kicks her feet forwards and backwards, and you can feel her body kind of drifting behind the swing to get that sense of motion in the body. And then when you stop pushing the analog stick here, she goes limper and kind of drifts behind it. And we thought early on that this would be achieved through using some rigid body simulation with some ragdoll or something like that, and the results were terrible. And we tried for a while to do that, and then realized that to get this kind of flowing movement that felt very realistic, we actually needed to just use a lot of animations and use the data that we had in terms of velocity and acceleration and player input to give us this nice feeling of blending different animations together to get that variety of movement. And that's a lot of what making the character feel believable is about for us, is actually using variety animations rather than using particularly complex systems. One place where that stands out is just walking around in the world. 6 has over 20 different styles of locomotion, 20 styles of walking around in the game. The examples here we have on the top row is her default running animation, her running animation where she's tired, and you can see that she's sort of slumped down, her legs are much heavier, her arms are dropping down. On the bottom row there is a status effect where she's in pain, something's making her have a headache and she's rushing away from that, and then wading through shoes actually. But the different types of animation here, it's really nice to be able to get that sense of things changing in her. But to achieve that, like each one of these locomotion styles has animations for like walking, jogging, multiple for sprinting, for turning around, for starting up, for stopping, turning on the spot. There's like a whole bunch of things, and that's all duplicated for crouching. So to actually manually blend all of those together would be an enormous amount of work to do. So we use a system for this that essentially we create a set of animations for locomotion dynamically in runtime and send it to the system, and then the system adapts to that. And it's actually built on a layered system. So this is some of the animation slots that we have for a locomotion style. So by default, you just get the default animations in the result. If you are tired, then we lay the tired animations over the default animations to give a different result. And what's interesting about this is that we don't actually have to implement all of the tired animations. In this example, there's no crouch tired animation, so we just fall back to the default. And this is really useful because we have 20 different styles of locomotion, but not all of them support everything. And it's quite easy to set them up so that we can just support a minimal amount of animations to get things up and running. And then it's up to the animator to decide, do I want to flesh this one out? Do I want to add crouching for this one? Do I add sprinting for this one? And it gives a lot of control and a lot of scalability. And similarly, if we have you're tired and you're on a balance beam, then we will lay a balance over tired because staying on the balance beam is more important than the fact that you're tired. And we get a result that's kind of a mix of all 3 sets of animations. And just having this variety and being able to blend in and out of these constantly throughout the game gives us some really nice dynamics. And the next video will show the character stumbling when she runs into physical things. So she stumbles as she knocks into these pots. And then when she picks up and carries it, it's the same locomotion system that she's using to walk. it just makes it very, very easy to change the styles. We have multiple carrying styles as well. And it's another just walking around, we've changed the animations up to give her a different feel. As she walks through these broken pieces, you'll see her put her arms out a little bit and walk on tiptoes. This again is like another locomotion set, and you get a nice interplay between the normal, the tiptoes, and the stumble, and we can just continually blend between these. I didn't actually implement the these two features, the careful walking and the stumbling. That was done by another programmer, and I think he did it in like one day to actually hook all the logic up for that, having never seen the system before. So it was very quick to get those kind of nice dynamic effects in there. I want to show what happens if you have without the stumble and with the stumble. So without, it feels okay. You don't really miss that there's a stumble there. But when you have the stumble, you really get a sense there's something more going on for her. And it's kind of important for us that you get that reaction back. It's not just the world's reacting to her. She reacts to things that are happening in the world as well. And you really want for her to be responding to those things. You know, she's got no shoes on, is kind of skinny, like she bangs her shins on something, you want to feel that she's felt something. And the same as when she goes through the shards, you want her to react to the fact she's walking barefoot through broken glass. And these aren't just animation styles, these are actually mechanically changing as well. So when you stumble, I think you go down to like 80% speed, and we stiffen up the turning. So it's not enough that you it jumps out at you and grabs you, but it's enough that you can feel that something happened in the controls as well. And similarly, when going through the shards, you slow down a bit, and you can't force her to run through the shards. She won't do it, and she reacts to those dynamic things in the environment. So taking this kind of system-driven approach to these kind of animations, there's a lot of pros. You get to reuse code paths a lot. The locomotion system was in, and we had to do very little work to add new styles, and that's why we ended up with over 20 styles. I don't think that we actually planned to do that, but it was just so easy to add new things that we kept on doing it. It also means you can polish much later into development. We added one style, like a noisy floor style, I think slightly after beta, because the audio guys came to us and said, like, we can't make this noisy floor, this creaking floorboards feel right just with audio. We need to have her react to it. And so we added in a noisy floor. It was very little work, and because we weren't having to add new code, it was very safe to do as well. It's just extra data and extra polish. It also meant that we could flesh out those locomotion sets. So Marcus was adding in sort of turning animations and quick turn animations for various locomotion sets well into alpha, without any real worry and without having to have interdependencies with me as a coder when I was trying to do my bug fixing and everything like that. It just freed him up to do that. The downsides are the initial setup time, which isn't too much, but you sort of have to think a lot about what you want to try and achieve with it and then what your system's going to do. And that also restricts you as well. It's restrictive in terms of the fact that your system is going to do what it does. So when you put something in the system, it has to behave the same way. It's also restrictive in the sense that because the system is so quick to set things up, if you want something that's a little bit different, you have to weigh up, well, this will take a few days to implement, or we could just put it in the locomotion system, and it maybe doesn't give us exactly what we want, but it gives us something that's good enough, so we take the quick route. And it's a little bit hard to do fine-tuning with this. I mean, you always can do a special case for something, but you maybe don't want to be doing that. And I think as well with that, actually, that we, having the sheer number of things that we had in there, I think that was really a great win for the project in terms of giving her character and giving her reactions to the world. The other side, so a lot of time we're blending a lot of animations and we're using a lot of different animations to vary things up. The other side is the more procedural approach, which is largely driven by IK, inverse kinematics. So for those of you who don't know, inverse kinematics is basically modifying the existing animations to react to the environment. So if you have like a grab animation that's animated for this, and you want to grab something that's over here, you don't want to have extra animations for all of these. You just tell the IK system, I want the hand to come here, and it calculates where the shoulder should be, the elbow should be, the wrist should be, and modifies your animations in runtime, which is the example there with the foot placement as well, like standing on different heights. It's all done dynamically. IK and Little Nightmares, we're using iKinema, which is a full body solver. And full body basically means that you can place various points and it will kind of pull the whole body around. So if you're grabbing over here, it will pull the shoulder down, it will come through the back and really modify everything that's happening there. And we use it for foot placement a lot. We also use it a lot for grabbing objects of different sizes and shapes, again, to get that variety in there, get that difference of interactability. One of the things that we do is that we don't actually IK the hands and the feet directly. We use additional bones on the hands and the feet to give our IK targets. And the reason for that is if you have to IK the hand, if you're sort of grabbing over here and you have this animation for grabbing and you want that animation to play, if you have IK as well, you either have to blend the IK in early, in which case it kind of just pulls the arms across rather than doing a nice action. It just pulls the arms, or you blend it in late and then you get the animation and then it pulls down. So neither of these are like good solutions to that problem. What we do instead is we place a placement bone at the target and move the hand into where the target should be. And then if we move this down while the animation's playing, the hand doesn't get pulled in, it just gets kept the right distance away and keeps a lot more of the animation as the animator intended. So you get a lot more acting, you get a lot more personality in there, and you're not breaking things by using the IK. Along with that, video for showing this. This is when she climbs onto a ladder. You can see the hands, the attachment bones move into place, and then the hands come in afterwards. And the same thing's happening with the feet as well. And all four of them are coming in at different times. And if the ladder isn't quite the right height, she'll adjust and each limb will adjust as it should do. Because we have the different limbs coming at different times, we use an awful lot of animation metadata as well. So we use curves in the animation to drive the influence of the IK, so how strong the IK is taking effect. That's really useful in this example where each limb comes up at a different time. We can time in how the animation blends then, the IK blends then. We can also, it's really helpful for hiding transitions. You can make the IK come in more aggressively when the animation is moving faster. So it hides it from the player and gives you a much, much smoother result and makes it really easy to fine tune. At the beginning of the project, we were just triggering this from code and saying like, yeah, blend the IK in over 0.3 seconds or something. And this gives us much more control and much more specifics. It also means that when she's jumping onto a climbable surface, I think there's like 6 or 7 different attachment animations, each one of them with their own way that she attaches. Each one has different curves to drive it and some notifies, a few other bits of metadata. And all that has to happen then is that we fire off that animation and listen to the curves and the notifies, and that tells the gameplay what to do. So each animation is customized and tuned to be exactly how it needs to be, and we don't have to write special case code for that, it's all in the data. We use a lot of root motion with the IK. The character uses both root motion and just kinematic movement for various reasons, but a lot of the time when we're doing traversals or transitions, we use root motion. So that is that the actual motion of the character is baked into the animation data, so we know how she should be traveling when she's climbing up a ledge. And the final thing we do that isn't actually part of the metadata but is built upon that is this thing I call positional fix-up. I don't know if there's a proper term for it, but essentially the idea behind that is that we look at what the IK is doing. And so again, if you're sort of grabbing down here, like you can grab like that, and we have the full body IK, so it comes through the back and everything, but that isn't a good pose to be in for grabbing something. Like you want it to be grabbing like this, and you're grabbing down here, and it's pulling you over. All we do is look at like what the animated pose is, what the IK pose is, and we look to try and move the character to minimize the difference between those. So in essence, instead of doing this, we just move her over, and you've got a much better body position. It's much closer to what you had before. That stuff works really nicely for grabbing hold of ledges. It's quite hard to demonstrate with ledges, so I'm going to show with the climbing system that we have. So this is using root motion to drive her, IK to find positions to grab hold of, and fix up to keep her moving smoothly. And you should be careful, you'll see her sort of grab out to the sides, and sometimes her legs will cross over. And this is all using one set of like upwards animations and downwards animations. And she's just dynamically adjusting to the shape of this, this climbing surface. And similarly on these cages are essentially a grid shape, but there's quite different spacing between the handholds. And she is just, you know, reaching out to the side and crossing over and grabbing. It gives a nice kind of like scrambly feel, but it also makes her feel very situated in the game, which I think is really nice. The climbing system can actually do a lot of things. We didn't get anything particularly showy into the game for various reasons. We had some things that were like a lot more detailed, you know, in terms of the climbing. Sadly, some of those things got cut simply because you know, the areas they were in got cut from the game. It's the nature of game development. There's also some other reasons why we didn't get a huge amount in, which I'll come back to later. But there's still, like, I think it's nice, even though it's not showy. I've never seen anyone actually call this out in like reviews or people talking online, which makes me a little bit sad, but I still think it's nice that we can have these really organic shapes in the world, which is really important to the environmental art style, and she can still actually climb on them and feel very connected to them. Next video is about the positional fix-up climbing around in a spiral. So it's using exactly the same animations, but as she grabs slightly round each time, we drift the body round and she climbs in a spiral. And this is all still just using IK, positional fix-up, and root motion with the exact same climbing. So the climbing system isn't aware that there is a spiral to climb up here. It's just adapting to what is in the world. And finally, this one is more about the way that the climbable is reacting to her. So this is shelves that are wobbling as she climbs up them. So as she grabs hold of each shelf, it wobbles a little bit. And because we're IKing to it, her hand is locked onto that. So you get her moving with the cupboard, and it's a really nice kind of like connected feel to it. And also here, you know, it's very subtle, but you have overhangs, and she sort of climbs backwards on overhangs and handles those. Again, we didn't get a huge number of these moving things into the game. The reason for this one is that we hit some problems with performance towards the end of the project that were largely about render performance for moving objects. That was one of the easiest places where we could save performance and hit frame rate on consoles, which is a shame, and no one really wanted to cut it, but that had to happen. So there are some things where we didn't use IK. We had this very proficient IK system from Kinema, and a few places where we chose not to use it that typically do use IK. In particular, looking at points of interest where a head looks up at things in the world, and when touching against walls. Both of these things are typically done with IK, but I haven't actually seen that many examples in games, even in AAA games, where it feels natural. Often the touching on walls, when that happens, feels very magnetic and stiff, and looking at stuff can often feel a bit creepy when it's IK driven. We chose not to do it that way, and for the pressing on walls, for example, we didn't treat it as actually pressing on the wall. It's more that she's putting her hand up kind of near it just to keep it away a little bit. And that's actually also tied in very much with the controls and how you're pressing her. If you're pushing her into the wall, she'll sort of put her hand up and avoid walking that close. And the looking around, we used additive blending for that. And we did hit some problems with that because of all the different locomotion styles. Some of them she's looking very down, and it's hard to get her head up to look at what you wanted to look at. We had to special case a lot of things there. So I'm not sure if that one we should have stuck with the IK for longer. We had problems with IK as well. It's hard to know which way to go. I think we got okay results out of it though. So from our experience of working with inverse kinematics, full body IK can give really great results. It takes a lot of tuning. The actual rig that drives how the IK works is a huge list of magic numbers that a technical artist, Ella, spent a lot of time getting right and getting tuned for us. And there's also a lot of work in actually getting it to behave well with the dynamics, to actually get it blending in well. So it's not kind of a solution that you get stuff for free. It's a lot of work to get it feeling nice. It also can't replace animations. So if you think about the 12 principles of animation, these are basically the core fundamentals of animating a character. IK can't help you with any of those. If you're not aware of what those are, just look them up. They're quite simple and easy to understand, and it's really important to know if you're going to work with anything like this. IK can't do any of that for you. It's just going to place things in the world. It's not going to give you character or acting or any of the things you need to make a character compelling. So we always tried to reduce the workload of the IK, always tried to reduce how much the IK was doing so we could get more back to the acting of the character. And we found that some things that feel like they could be IK actually work better without, partly because of the elements of acting that go into that. Next is these systems are really nice to have because you get a lot of stuff throughout the game, but having custom reactions in the world that are very specific and unique to individual locations helps to bring the world alive. And again, the more alive the world is, the more she feels situated in there, especially if she's reacting with that. For this, you want to take a tools-based approach. You want to give generic tools to art and design and allow them to craft content and go wild with it. I have a couple of examples of this. So this is actually a test level. This is some wobbling planks. They just wobble as she walks over them. And again, with the IK, the feet follow the wobbly planks, and you get this nice feel of things reacting. Again, there's a few wobbly planks in the game, but there aren't that many for the same reason as the wobbly shelves. Another example is this piano, which is a really nice set piece where we get, you should be able to hear the piano, kind of. But yeah, you get a nice set piece, a nice like one-time effect that you can get in the world that you don't want to have like coders making special case that. You want tools that make this kind of thing easy. The final one is actually one of the technical artists put together a system built upon all these footstep stuff so that she could walk through various materials and get nice reaction to that. So she's walking carefully through that goo, and as she comes off the goo, she leaves behind these little black gooey footsteps behind her, which is really nice. Splashing through the water, washes off the goo, and then she's leaving behind kind of wet footsteps. So if you can get a good tools-based approach, then you can get really nice stuff like this in the game. We actually didn't really do a very good job with that in terms of providing the tools, which is largely on me. We had a lot of tools there that were kind of worked, but were really hard to use. The climbing tools, for example, they were not prohibitively hard to use, but they were very, very time consuming. Like every grabbable point had to be marked up in the level so that she could do it. And one of the things that happened there was that, we got a few things in that were really detailed and showy with that. And then those things got cut just because the areas they were in got cut. And it was just so much work to actually do those things that people weren't going to be doing them because they had other priorities. They had to make the levels playable and everything else. And it was too much work for them to do that. For the footstep stuff, it was always possible to get that footstep data out, but it was a real pain to do it in scripting until we added a new tool that would just give you the data that you needed. Like there's a footstep here, it's in the area that you're interested in, and all you have to do is fire off particles or do whatever logic you want to do there. So if your tools aren't easy to use, people will not use them. That's the big takeaway from this. And I think we got some really nice stuff in there because our designers and artists put a lot of work into it and put a lot of effort into the details. I think with better tools and with more groundwork from our side, from the code side, then we could have got much, much nicer things. There's also some stuff to do with like getting the tools in early. I think some of the render performance stuff with moving objects, that could probably have been quite improved if we had had the tools in earlier. We would have had more of those kind of effects in earlier. We would have seen the performance hit and we could have budgeted for it better. And there was less chance that would have got cut at the end of the project. Audio is hugely essential for creating a believable situation in the world. I think audio in games in general is hugely underestimated. I think the audio tends to get down prioritized. And the variety in the audio adds a lot to physicality in your character. In the game, there's so much subtle variation in her audio, like different footsteps depending on what surface she's on, if she's on wood or metal or in one of these liquid spaces. Different footstep sounds if she's jogging or running or if she's tired. Different grab sounds based upon what she's grabbing. And then little bits of like raincoat fluttering and all sorts of things that there's so much in there that varies up and changes and just makes her so much more believable. And the final point is that things actually look better with audio, and I mean that in quite a literal sense. There is an effect where if two things are supposed to collide visually and they don't really collide, they just kind of miss, you will see them miss. But if you play the impact sound over the top, your mind's going to sit there and think, well, I think they missed, but it happened pretty fast and I heard them connect, so they probably connected, and you'll see that connection happening. We had a few times when we were trying to get the animation blending working and feeling nice, and we just couldn't do it. And then we realized we had no audio. And once we got audio in, the animations that looked kind of bad suddenly look great again. And the audio is really key to selling you on the fact that this mechanic has happened. And people take it a lot for granted because it kind of like comes in as almost a secondary sense, but it's fundamental to selling everything that you want to do. And the way we worked with audio for 6, and largely in the game as a whole, there's no audio in the gameplay code. I never fire off any sounds. I never interact with the audio at all in my code. I just fire off events, things like the character jumped, landed, various things like this. The lighter came on, all this stuff that we provide events for. And we also provide a lot of APIs for the audio designers to read the state of the player and the state of the world, so they can change things up, so they can know what surface she's running on, know what's going on. And we just gave them control. We're using Unreal, so they have the visual scripting, the blueprint system, which meant that even though neither of the audio guys working on the project have much experience with scripting, they could build their own systems on top of what we'd done. And they didn't have to wait around for code to implement stuff for them. And the times when they did need things from me, it was very, very simple and quick to get that data to them, so I could do it on the side. You do sometimes want to use coders or maybe technical designers for more complex systems. I think that we lent a little bit too far on the wrong side of that, and the audio guys did some systems that were probably more complex than they should have been left with. And they achieved their goals, but it took them longer. But I think we landed pretty well with that because they got such great results and they had so much freedom to do what they wanted to do and actually to get in the level of detail into her and into the rest of the world that they wanted to do. Okay, so in summary, we fake everything. We just focus on the feel of what you're supposed to be feeling. And we don't worry about whether or not it's actually properly interacting. And a lot of it is just, if one thing reacts and the other thing reacts at the same time, you feel like there's something much more impressive going on. A lot of stuff built around dynamics and variation, just changing up how things work in reaction to the environment, changing up how the character animates, finding good ways to blend those systems and present different variety and movement to the player. Yeah, reactions between the character and the world is really important, and all of the details add up. I really think that that's actually true. Like, there's a lot of stuff going back to the stumble where I think that you don't really miss the stumble when you don't see it, but you do feel something more when it's there. And there's so many details all over the place in terms of how she behaves and how she reacts to things. And most of those things, 99% of players aren't going to see the individual things, but they're going to get a sense of what we want them to feel from the player. And I think that really helps to give you a sense of that character. And use a combination of systems and crafted content. And the crafted content side is the stuff I was talking about with tools. And I definitely think that getting good tools into the game is really, really important. Because ultimately, I think a lot about the character in terms of her personality and how she moves and how she behaves and who she is. But realistically, she is just a system running on data. And when you're working with a player character, you tend to think about the data as the controls data, right? That's the thing that you're focused on most, especially at the beginning. But that's a tiny, tiny proportion of the data that you're actually interacting with, especially if you want her to interact with the world. The vast majority of data you have is in the world. And your systems are only going to be as good as the data they get from the world. And there's two limiting factors on how good that data is going to be. One is how well you communicate to people about how the data should be and why it needs to be that way, so they can actually produce that data. And the other side is how good are your tools to enable people to make that data and make it quickly. So that's so important to think about that side of things when you want your character to interact with the world. So yeah, if you want to know more, we have a booth here at Nordic Game. You can play both Little Nightmares and Static there. We also have Little Nightmares at the Epic booth, which is just across from the Tarsier booth. We also have another Little Nightmares talk here. Hilda is going to be on Friday morning in Reykjavik talking about the AI characters, the chefs and the janitor, and learnings from those systems, which should be really good. So, that's me done. Do we have any questions? Pardon? Debug tools. Depends what you mean. I have an entire debug system for the character, which sits on top of her, and you can switch out loads of display information, loads of visual information, printing loads of values. There's a lot of that stuff that sits in a separate system that just plugs into her, that can be easily switched on and off to get information out. And it just draws lots of vectors and lots of lasers and prints loads of stuff to the screen. No? Okay. Thank you.